chat. I don't know.
Senior Bowl studs, duds, and everything in between. That's what we're going to be talking today. Today's video brought to you by BetUS. We'll talk to you a little bit later how you can get an exclusive deal from them. Here, simulcasting on multiple channels, not just mine, over on Patriots Global, where I cover everything the New England Patriots, but also on your channel, Dose of Dion 2.0, where you cover the Detroit Lions. Today, though, me and you brought together to talk about some of these top prospects here that we saw over 2 days from the Senior Bowl. Now, as you can see, we do have credentials here with Roundtable Sports. So we were live, we were present at Mobile, Alabama, got some interviews, which we are going to be breaking down today. But Dose, before we get into some of these guys, how you doing?
Man, I'm good. I mean, this is a special occasion, man. We don't get to do stuff like this. Everything we do is virtual now. So to do something in person is pretty awesome. And, Richie's got the setup, so there's a lot going on here, but it's a lot cooler than what I'm usually working with. So I'm fired up, dude.
Yeah, everybody might be looking at this and saying, Patriots Global, the quality looks a little bit better. I wish you guys could actually see the amount of equipment that is here right now. I know everybody's kind of texting our Discord like, Colby, where are you? You're a little bit late. That's why we're a little bit late. A lot of technical difficulties, a lot of things we were figuring out. But, Dose, let's just go ahead and hop right into this. I want to start here with the national roster because I do feel like the national team was the team that was overall better, a lot more intriguing versus the American team. I do feel as if the American team, the defense was that biggest takeaway. The offense was struggling a lot, and we'll get into them a little bit later. Let's start here with the national roster. Who are some of the top guys that you were looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of guys that stood out that I just wanted to give some attention to. I keep going back to the offensive line first and foremost. I got to start right there. And I think there's a couple of guys that we haven't mentioned a ton that maybe deserve a little bit of love there. Obviously, Connerly had a really strong first day, had a couple losses today. He looked a little bit human, so that was cool. But, specifically, remember I got my man Ozzy Trapilo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I thought he had a plus today. He had a plus on the interior, and he's a guy that's projected to go into mid-rounds. Someone that I didn't really know anything about, and today that kind of came along. Jonah's been playing inside-outside, offensive tackle, offensive guard. So we've seen a lot of flexibility, and the guy that I was really circling was Anthony Belton. I want to see how that was going to translate today. I think Anthony Belton's put two solid days together. So I think this offensive line has kind of came along a little bit outside of just the top pieces.
Yeah, for sure. One of my favorite guys that not just from day one, but even that I noticed on day two, I would say even took a leap forward on day two, was the Iowa State wide receiver in Jaden Higgins. Now, this was a guy that day one we saw winning his one-on-one matchups. This was also a guy that we saw winning even in team drills where he was targeted on day one on back-to-back plays there in the passing game. Day two stood out even more. This guy is 6'4", a contested catch guy, had about a 56% contested catch rate this past season at the collegiate level with only roughly a 3% drop rate. This is a sure-handed guy. Now, when you hear that, you hear the measurables, you hear the style of play of the wide receiver, you usually think, well, okay, that's a guy who's going to be a little bit slow, a little bit sluggish. Maybe the route tree isn't all that great, but he wins at the point of attack. That's not the case with Higgins. This is a guy that not only can he make the contested catches, but he has really freaking good footwork. These guys that are bigger, a lot of times, it's harder for them to get in and out of their breaks. It's hard for them to be quick because they have more weight, ultimately bringing them back down to earth. But with Higgins, we saw him getting open in those short to intermediate routes too with just how good his footwork was. So for me, the fact that he is trending upwards the way he was very impressive. Do you have anything that you saw with Jaden Higgins that stood out?
Dude, you can see it right here. I had Higgins, better day today. I had him on with a win against Tommy Hill. I think it's what you hit on. I think it's the route tree that they ask him to run. I think today it fit to him a little bit better. They saw him run an in-breaker. He had success on, create a lot of separation. The slants that he runs, the footwork that he has, it's such a loose piece for such a big player. It's weird, but it has that kind of sink. It gives me, I don't want to go like Drake London type of vibes. I don't want to get that far because I loved him after the catch. But it does he looks better now, I think he did on film. And we both have him in the top 5, right? Did you have him in the top 5? I had him 5.
I had him as my fifth.
So we were both, so we were right there in the top 5. Both thought he was a top 5 receiver. And I think at the Senior Bowl, he's looked better than what I saw on the film, to be honest with you. I think he looks like a guy that's like, yo, this is really going to, anybody at that size that you said that can separate level 1 consistently, that's rare, and he's bringing that.
Yeah, I had him as about a 3rd to 4th round pick originally, but if he's shining at the Senior Bowl the way he is, this guy's going to be a 2nd round pick. Now, obviously, there's a lot more of this process to go. We still have day 3 of the Senior Bowl. We ultimately have the game. On top of all of this, We also then have the rest of the pre-draft process. We have the combine, all of that. So there's still time for his stock to rise, time for his stock to ultimately fall. But this is a guy that's definitely trending upwards and could be a second-round pick. Now, like we said, we were there. We do have credentials. I was able to actually get my first ever interview with Jaden Higgins. So we're going to play that here and show you what Jaden Higgins had to say. So let me make sure we pull this up here for you guys. Let's put this.
Oh, we got interviews? Okay.
Oh, we got interviews, Dose. We are pulling up the
Man.
interviews.
We're
right,
fancy
let's show
now,
it, bro.
Colby.
Yeah,
That's what this is.
We're fancy now, Dose.
Yeah.
We got interviews, bro. All right, let's take a listen. Out here at the Senior Bowl with wide receiver Jaden Higgins. Jaden, how does it feel to be back on the field, putting on the pads again?
Yeah, it's awesome. I feel like I haven't been on the field in a little while. It was great coming out here and competing with the guys, ready to get back tomorrow and do the same thing.
Yeah, man, for sure. You look like the best wide receiver on the field today. What does it mean to you to really come out here and raise that draft stock?
I just want to show what I can do, what I do on film, what I've been doing all year, all throughout my career. Just continue to come out here and, get the plays down and dominate my matchup.
Any NFL teams you've talked to yet?
Yeah, we talked to a couple. We talked to like 16 teams last night. But yeah, just a rotation of those guys.
My man, and last question I want to ask you is if you could work with any quarterback in the NFL, what quarterback would it be?
Man, any quarterback, honestly. I love all quarterbacks. As long as they can, get me the ball and do what I do, then I'd love to go anywhere.
Jaden Higgins, guys. Colby Cochran reporting from Mobile, Alabama, Roundtable Sports. Now to get back here, Dose, get us back on screen here. He wasn't the only wide receiver from Iowa State that stood out, because Jalen Noel, also from Iowa State, stood out at that wide receiver position. Now, very different style of wide receivers, I must say, right? You look at somebody like Higgins, and he's ultimately, like we said, that bigger 6'4" contested catch type of receiver. Noel has a really, really good route tree, really, really freaking good footwork, and that's how he gets open. I mean, we saw multiple different route trees, from the short to intermediate to even deep section, and what he's able to do within that route tree with his feet is what got him open. What did you think about him?
Yeah, I think you hit on it. And he did show us that ability, and I think in contested situations, what he's shown so far. He's been one of the more consistent standouts, I think, for the receiver room. Like, for me personally, I've been focusing more on the trenches, but he's still the guy that you take note of, even when you're seeing those drills just off to the side. I know you guys have been super heavy on that side specifically, but yeah, like when you're even just looking at the names from this roster as a whole, outside of Tez Johnson, he's been one of the more consistent producers throughout this entire Senior Bowl.
Is there anybody else on the offensive side of the football that stood out to you here from this national roster?
Yeah, I want to touch on a couple running backs here. I mean, look, obviously we did the thing with Donovan Edwards, but I thought today, he had two of the nastiest routes. Now, he did have a drop, but the one I wanted to point out was he ran like a wheel route. Like, he pressed the seam, and he ended up putting his hand in the air, like letting everybody know, like, yo, I'm open. And he broke off of that route to basically sell it. And it was a beautiful little nuance that Donovan Edwards added. And he dropped that pass, I believe. But outside of that, like, he had multiple wins. He talked about his ability to separate. And I think that we've seen through the first 2 days is, like, he's absolutely a separator. And against some of these other guys, like, for example, Ollie Gordon, I thought he showed a little bit of that as well. But there's some of these dudes that I thought were a little bit limited, like Damian Martinez separating as a back. Same thing with Marks out of USC. But it's the guys that have stood out, a little bit of Ollie Gordon, but specifically for me, it's been Donovan Edwards in the passing game.
And you know what? We saw you have your first interview with Donovan Edwards, the running back out of Michigan. Should we play that?
You know what I mean? Come on now.
All right. Let's pull this up for you. Let's make sure we click on the right screen.
Hey, Edwards is going to be good, chat. You know what I mean? It's going to be a problem.
Hey, Donovan, we're here with Donovan Edwards, man. I'm a Michigan fan, by the way.
You know
what I mean? You know what I mean? We ended the season pretty darn good, bro. Hey, I just want to ask you one question, and it's in the passing game. What do you think you can bring to the table in the passing attack? I feel like not enough people talk about that aspect of your game, but we see that you can get open.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, what are we missing there?
I would definitely say the thing that I bring is first the pass protection aspect. Being able to pass protect first, identifying blitzes and watching safeties in the rotation, and just knowing the defensive schemes. Also, too, I just believe in myself. I have tremendous faith and confidence in my own, not only my hands, but my route running ability, too. So,
Bro, man, I'm excited to see you this season, man. Good luck.
Thank you.
Wherever you go, hopefully it's a Lion, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm glad y'all beat the Ohio State.
Hey, yo, I'm biased, bro.
Hopefully the Lions. Hopefully the Lions. And you know what? I'm
goodness.
glad that you asked him about that, though, because I'm somebody who is big on running backs' ability to receive out of the backfield. Not even out of the backfield per se, but being able to be lined up all over the offensive formation, in the slot, out wide. Us Patriots fans know that's part of what made James White so great. He wasn't necessarily the most dynamic running back, but it was what he was able to do as a receiver. You know, as a Patriots fan, thinking about James White, the biggest play that sticks out to me is he had this play when the Patriots played the Baltimore Ravens in 2019, and he took Earl Thomas just on a go route, and Tom Brady lofts the ball up to him, and a running back, like a 5'9" running back, goes up and absolutely mosses him. That is the value with an actually like a good receiving back. And I also put value into a running back's ability to pick up the blitz, to be a good pass blocker, and I think that's what Donovan Edwards is kind of alluding to in that video, and I think part of what's going to rise that stock.
Now, my concern, just a quick concern to that, and you're absolutely right. Like, a guy that can separate his running back is pretty special. But he does have a couple drops that are like uncontested, and he did fumble today. And it was just like a random fumble. Whatever it is, ball security needs to improve. Okay, that's something there. But I think the ability to separate his back is hard to teach, and he has that.
Yeah, ball security is job security.
That's absolutely. And right now it looks pretty awful on that side.
Shout out to my boy Mick Goat coming in here with a $1 donation super chat. My brother Mick Goat, I absolutely appreciate you. You guys know the best way at supporting both of our channels is by donating. So make sure if you guys want your question or comment concern answered, that donating is the best way at doing so. Now, Dose, I want to let you know about somebody that I was a little bit disappointed in over the last 2 days. Somebody on the offensive side of the football in the national team that I thought was going to be better. I know you know exactly where I'm going because this is another wide receiver. And as Patriots fans, somebody that we have been looking for. Someone that if you have followed Roundtable Sports, which make sure you are Roundtable SN on all platforms, Instagram, Twitter. This is where we're posting all of this content. Both on day 1 and on day 2, before those days started, I said that Xavier Restrepo, receiver out of Miami, was a guy that I was looking for, and both days didn't show out. Now, it's not that he's been bad. It's not like he has terrible drops. He's not getting open. He's fumbling. Any of these things. He's made some good grabs, but he's been wildly inconsistent. He hasn't shown out. And as Patriots fans, in Josh McDaniels' offense, now that he's back, we're going to be looking for that slot receiver that can come in, take all the bulk of the work offensively, get 80, 90 receptions. Your Wes Welkers, Julian Edelman, Jacoby Myers. They don't currently have that on the roster. I know everybody's going to say, well, what about Pop Douglas? That's a gadget guy. That's not someone who's going to be your starting slot receiver that can take the bulk of the work, that can consistently take those hits in the middle of the field. I thought Xavier Restrepo could be that guy. I know there's a lot of Xavier Restrepo fans out there. For me, that stock definitely didn't go up. In fact, I think it dropped a little bit. Yeah,
for me, I think the guy that did go up was Jalen Lane. He was the guy that I noted a few times today. But to your point, I think the thing with Restrepo is, and I was talking to Broshmo about this, shout out to Draftaholics, you know what I mean? We've been doing this now.
Baby.
And even he pointed out, like, Restrepo to me, I think has, and I don't want to be like disrespectful, but from what I've seen coming in, I can only take what I've seen. And then seeing the Senior Bowl, I think he's cemented himself as, for me so far, he's a slot receiver. He's level 1, level 2. Vertically, I don't think that's going to open up very much. You know, the guys can recover. I don't think he maintains separation because I don't think he's very sudden. I think everything kind of feels the same. But I think that's a really valuable, because what we're talking about, right, wide receiver DB one-on-ones, you're out wide, you're one-on-one with the cornerback in space. When we're talking about putting him in the slot and you're working zone coverage, those kind of areas I think he'll be successful at. And he can run a very diverse route tree, but I think that there's just going to be limitations to what he can bring.
Yeah, one more guy that I do want to hit on here on the offensive side of the football, again from the national roster, that for me didn't perform up to expectations, was Harold Fandon Jr., the tight end out of Bowling Green. What did you think about him? Because this was a guy that both of us thought was going to have a way better Senior Bowl. I had him as my 3rd best tight end when we did our Draftaholics episode breaking down these tight ends. I think you did too. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, he's in my top 5, yeah.
So what have you thought about his performance? Because even day 1, we saw him have a really, really bad drop, wasn't really working through contact, turned around, had all the leverage, and just simply dropped the ball, slapped him in the hands, and just fell on the floor.
I'll be honest, I did think today was an improvement. Like, we were very down on it after yesterday because it just didn't produce. I think today was an improvement. One, there was a play that I think he ended up having a block, and they tried like a little end around. He got just enough of a guy, he sprung a run. And I think that's kind of always been the game of, not always, but that's what Fannin brings, is you see it. He's a power player, bro. He's a people mover. He's a force when he gets off the bus. You're like, who is that dude playing tight end? So I think that competitiveness has showed up, but there was also one route today that I thought he ran pretty well when they were working some of the one-on-ones, kind of like ran a deep outbreaker, separated, made a grab, and it was an explosive route. And I think for him, it's a little bit stiff. It doesn't feel as loose when he's trying to shake guys, but he can lean in and he needs to really dial into, how do I separate against backers? I'm more explosive, right? I'm more athletic. I'm bigger than you at the catch point. So I think for him, it almost feels like there's going to be a process of, again, the right route tree. You know, I think of like Gronkowski, bro. Overpower some dudes and also just be more athletic because that's what you have in your game.
Yeah, and I think that we would be doing a disservice to the audience if we didn't mention another guy before we move on to the American roster, or at least the defensive side of the national roster, is Tez Johnson out of Oregon, another wide receiver. Now, I've been someone who's confidently said that I feel like Higgins has been, that top guy for many different reasons. Tez Johnson has gotten open a lot. He's not just fast. He doesn't have just speed, but he has short area quickness too. I mean, this guy was beating pretty much every single defensive back that he went up against. Yep. He was gliding through everybody, even when they set him up for screen passes, short passes. Now, I ultimately believe that, hey, Tez Johnson should be looking good in these practices because speed is supposed to kill in these practices where, yes, it's a Senior Bowl. Yes, they're wearing pads, but leading up at least until that game, there really isn't a whole lot of contact. It's mostly one-on-one. And those speed guys are the types of receivers that should be winning because it's not a real game, right?
There's no help.
You're not playing actual coverage. There's no help. So what have your thoughts been about Tez Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, I think the value is like guys at his size, they should be man beaters. Like if you don't beat man coverage, there's going to be a problem there, especially without support. But to what you said, I think he's been the most productive receivers. I don't know what his numbers are in the first 2 days of practice, but every day he's looked fantastic. He's super productive, and we have seen some of the vertical speed open up. Like we've seen the capability to take the top off, but I think when he flashed it at the beginning, it maybe would give you the sense of like that's what it's going to be. But he's opened it up more than that. I think, again, when he's been on the move, when he's been flying, sideline to sideline, he's making guys chase. That's when he's super effective. And I think you get teams that kind of use him on an end around, or they use him beneath the line of scrimmage, make guys chase him across the field. That kind of stuff, he's going to be very effective with. So I'm a fan of him, man. I'm a fan of Tez Johnson more than I was coming into this week after these 2 days.
Yeah, for me, I think I just have a little bit of PTSD because as Patriots fans, we drafted Tyquan Thornton back in 2022. This was a guy that was a second-round pick. We traded up for him in the second round. He ran, I believe, a 4.27 it was. That is one of the fastest 40-yard dashes that the NFL has ever seen. It was like top 6 all time. But then he comes in, looks really good in training camp, does nothing during the regular season for like the 3 years that he was here. Again, those types of speedster wide receivers, they're supposed to look good during this time, but just because they look good in training camp, just because they look good in these practices, doesn't mean they're going to actually go out there in a regular season game, especially at the NFL level, and make that same impact. So not to take anything away from Tez Johnson, but I do have my reservations.
You should. I think you should. It's a unique body type. But I will say the Patriots drafting receivers, maybe not the best. I mean, you know what I mean?
They're not the best at all, okay? They haven't been able to develop a wide receiver in God knows how long since I've been covering this team. But let's go and let's move on to the trenches here for this national roster. Is there anybody, offensive line, defensive line, that has really stood out for you over the last few years? I think I know where you might go with this.
I'm going to go a different direction. I want to go a different direction just to change it up a little bit. Because we're talking trenches, I want to go to that defensive line. Ooh. And his name's standing out to me, man. Junior Tafuna, no idea how to say guy's name. Super undersized, but he was playing on the interior defensive line. And when he was working his one-on-ones, I think he had some of the most impressive reps. I couldn't tell if he was a center or a defensive lineman watching him, but he was one of the most impressive players, showed so much athleticism. You saw some spin moves. He was out there at the bottom, at the end. I was like, yo, that's who that was. Once I started going back through my notes, I realized like that guy was incredibly productive. And I think that you see it across the board. Darius Alexander, who we had, the little interview with there. Darius Alexander put together another really strong day, built on yesterday, super explosive off the ball. I don't know that he answered the questions that I had, specifically about like, how's he going to deal with double teams, deal with that kind of stuff. But he definitely gets off the ball well. He can split gaps, and he brings a real impact as a pass rusher. He had, I think, one of the best reps today in one-on-ones in terms of, how like you're in person and it's different, because you hear the pads and you're like, okay, dudes are yelling at each other. There's just a different vibe. He had one of the best vibe plays, bro. When he just popped an offensive lineman and it sent like shockwaves and you're like, yo, who the heck was that? And it was Darius Alexander, man. So that guy's super talented. Toledo's had those explosive pieces, but it's got to be the undersized Junior Tafuno I don't know how. I just messed his name. That was a disaster. What I just said was not it, but it's that guy. Look him up. That's for me.
Now, with Darius Alexander, you mentioned that you did have an interview, and we do have that video now. So let's quickly play that for the people.
Good. All right, man, we're here with Darius Alexander, defensive lineman out of Toledo. And, man, look, I just got to ask you this question. What do you feel like at the Senior Bowl you can show people that maybe they had questions about or they didn't already know, that you can prove to people that you're capable of at an event like this?
What I just came here, I just came to compete with these other guys from Power 4 schools and other schools, but I came to show that I can play with the higher level. That's what I came here to do.
And Toledo's been putting out some defensive linemen. So you guys are building that. We can see it every year. What makes Toledo so special for putting out those defensive linemen?
What makes us special, we just a school who like to pride on ourselves on working. That's all we like to do. Shout out to big Coach O, Coach Frank Oakham. He pushes us every day. Shout out to Coach Vince Karras. That's our defensive coordinator. He challenges us every day, whether it's D-line, backers, safeties, corners, everywhere. And then just a tribute to Coach Canada. That's a guy who stayed with me throughout the whole course of my career, and I appreciate him very much.
Man, I appreciate your time. You got a lot of love in Toledo. Good. All right, man.
Can I just add on that real quick? Because I knew well, first off, let's not talk about the presser. He said things, I said things. It wasn't what it was.
We both said
You know what I
something.
mean? A little bit taller than me. But I put in my notes the specific plays that stood out, and I found it right here. So there was a play where he just worked around an offensive lineman just getting upfield. So you knew that was there. But his ability to drop his weight, he created that, speed to power that we talk about. For a guy at his size that kind of has that like slender build where you're thinking agile, for him to show that conversion to power, you talk about Mike Green. I know you're going to get to him for a similar reason because he showed that as well. And I bring up Tafuna because as a smaller player, he had one of the successful bull rush reps, which again, Mike Green also showed, which we'll get to. And he had a nasty spin. He was just finding ways to win. That's why I throw him in there, because guys like that, like Peebles, who we'll get to at some point, they don't have the measurables. So they have to find ways outside of it to win. And he found those multiple ways today.
Yeah, I agree. And like you just mentioned, Aeneas Peebles, this was a guy that I've been absolutely stunned with over the last 2 days. I mean, did you know the name Aeneas Peebles before we came to the Senior Bowl?
I knew him back in high school. He was my buddy. We used to chat and then hit Subway and stuff. But outside of that, I didn't know much.
No, that's not true.
No, bro. No, dude. I had no idea.
But look, we came in here day one, and there is this defensive tackle that just continuously made plays. Defensive tackle out of Virginia Tech, and every single time that he made a play, he was screaming. He was fired up. He was running down to the end zone every single time he made his play. And I started looking at him, I said, who is this guy? One-on-one matchups, you can allude to this. Won the majority of his one-on-one matchups, was able to get to the quarterback a little bit. But what stood out to me the most is that in those team drills, he had multiple plays, even plays that were back-to-back, getting stops on the ball carrier behind the line of scrimmage. Now, I do have my reservations on Peebles as we enter the NFL, and I'll be curious to see what you have to say about this. I mean, he's 6'1". He's 6'1" for a defensive tackle. I got an interview with him. You'll see my height compared to his, and not to out myself, okay, shout out to the short kings out there, bro. I'm only 5'10". I'm not all that. And this dude was just about the same height, which made me feel a little bit better about myself. But he's 6'1", 288 pounds. He's going to be very undersized as we enter the NFL. Currently projected as a 5th-round pick. I think that height's ultimately what's going to hurt his draft stock, but he's looked really good at the Senior Bowl for 2 days. I'll be very curious to see what he looks like for day 3 in the final day, and then ultimately this weekend in the game. But I wonder if there is a world in which in certain matchups as he enters the league that short size that he has, that small frame he ultimately has, can actually help him a little bit, because there are some very big offensive linemen in the NFL. We're talking about guys who are 6'6", even 6'7". There's guys who are 6'8" in the league. And if he can go up against some of these bigger guards, some of these interior offensive linemen, even some of these tackles, and get his mismatches, for those tall offensive linemen, it's hard for them to get down on ground level. It's hard for them to really, bend over and get down as low as some of these guys, put their shoulders down. And if Peebles can get low enough, that can actually be an advantage to him that can allow him to get around some of these larger offensive linemen. So maybe there is a world in which, in some cases, that is a strong suit for Peebles. But again, I think most NFL scouts are going to see that as a flaw.
Oh, I think absolutely. Well, I think the thing that he's going to need, if you want to go to your clip, the thing is like a guy like that, to your point, it's like, where do we get him on 1st and 2nd down? What does he fit in the run game? How is this actually going to work? Are they just going to attack him? And he has to be special in areas outside of it. And I think he had a great answer. He comped himself to Kalijah Cansey, guys that I wouldn't say he's done it to this point, but there's a blueprint to doing it. You just have to stand out in some other way. And so far, at very least against teams, he stood out.
Yeah, with Peebles, let's just make this clear. Neither me, neither Dos are telling you that this is going to be Aaron Donald. He's not going to be, a number one defensive tackle or a guy that's really going to take double coverage or anything like that, but he's going to be a situational guy and a rotational guy, and those guys are very important. Again, if you can get him in the 4th, even the 5th round, I think that this is going to be an absolute steal and a guy that can develop. But like you alluded to, I did get to interview him today on day 2 of the Senior Bowl. Let's hear what he had to say.
This was the best.
Colby Cock with Roundtable Sports reporting here from Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. Here with Virginia Tech defensive tackle Aeneas Peebles. Aeneas, how do you feel that you performed today compared to how you performed yesterday?
Man, I feel like I've had 2 active days. I've enjoyed both of the days. I feel like I was disruptive both days. I've been enjoying this whole week of practice, going against the best in the nation, and all I can say is I'm pretty happy.
Who's a current NFL player that you feel you emulate your game after?
Guys like Grady Jarrett, Kalijah Cansey, guys like that. I study their film all the time, just try to, be more like them.
And lastly here, what makes you different than the other defensive tackles here at the Senior Bowl?
No doubt about it. I feel like my quickness, my agility, my knack for the game, my football intelligence, things like that, are just going to separate myself from them.
Well, Aeneas, we appreciate the interview. I'm Colby Cochran, Roundtable Sports, reporting from Mobile, Alabama.
Dude, guy is awesome, bro. Dude, Peebles is amazing. That was my favorite of all the ones I've seen. Dude was locked in from jump, and I liked his answer because I feel like he's heard that. Like he's heard that forever, bro. You're too small, dude. Yep. And we've seen it work. We've seen it not. I remember Lions had a guy, Demetrius Taylor's 5'11". I think you can get away with height because it can be an advantage, but the size is the problem, right? If you're just too light, it's a problem. So like, what way can he make up for that? But clearly, he's heard it, and he's got guys that have done it at his size. I love his energy, bro.
Now, is there anyone else here on the defensive line that you liked?
Yeah, dude. Look, I'm not trying to make this too long, but this entire edge front is incredible across the board,
one of the
dude.
best edge classes that I think we've ever seen from what's being reported, by the way.
It's nasty. I mean, I'll just hit on a couple here. First off, I mean, just to go down, Job Joyner. You know what I mean? He's actually done a little bit of work. We were kind of laughing at it. He's actually put a little work together. But I'm going to go with my man here whose name I'm going to mess up for sure. Femi Oladejo out of UCLA. The last name was pretty good. I should have just said the last name than UCLA. That would have been pretty good. But no, he had wins one-on-one. He had a win on Trapilo, who I thought did well. He also had I think he had a win on Ursary in today. But he was the guy that yesterday when you watched him, you're like, there's a lot of finesse. There's a lot of bend. There's a lot of work to edge. And then today I thought that he continued that, and it was surprising. He did it against good offensive tackles. I even asked Broshmo about it, and he's like, yeah, I didn't know who that guy was either, but look at what he's doing. So he's been one of the most productive. You wondered if that's going to translate into the game playing the run as a pass rusher. How versatile is it? I'm fired up probably really high. I want to see what that looks like during the game. I want to see how he translates during the game because through one-on-ones, he's a menace.
Yeah, one of my favorite guys heading into this entire process, man, I was ecstatic when I found out that he was going to be at the Senior Bowl, is edge rusher Mike Green out of Marshall. This was a guy that I've been projecting for my New England Patriots to draft in my way too early mock drafts with Patriots fans. That's going to be coming out this weekend. This weekend when I'm back before I go out to the Super Bowl. So you guys can expect that. It's already done. But spoiler alert, I did draft Mike Green to the Patriots in the second round. But you know what? I don't think Mike Green's going to be there anymore. After his performance on day 2, there was a lot of buzz now about Mike Green going in the first round. In fact, me, Dan Mitchell, both saw a mock draft today that had him going in the top 10. Now, I like him. I really do. I see some Matthew Judon in his game. We'll talk about comps here in a little bit. But I don't know if he's someone who can go in the top 10. I could see him as like the 3rd or 4th best edge rusher. I'm not going to say the second. Now, again, the pre-draft process is still going. There's time for him to raise his draft stock. Killed it on day 2, had good moments on day 1, but didn't necessarily do what I was expecting him to. But again, how can you bounce back? How can you recover from that down day? And here on day 2, he 100% did that. There was a rep in one-on-ones where he went up against Josh Connerly, the tackle out of Oregon, who is a first-round projected tackle. In our show, Draftaholics, I had him as my 3rd best tackle. Remember where you had Connerly? You have him as your 3rd best too?
Sounds about right. He was in there. He was in the top 5 somewhere. I don't remember where, but I know he was in there.
So we both roughly had Josh Connerly in somewhere between our top 3 to top 4 tackles, and Mike Green was able to come in on that one-on-one matchup and absolutely bull rush him. Now, something we know about Mike Green is that he's known to be a little bit more of a speed rusher. The question was, can he add a little bit more power? Can he be a speed to power edge rusher? Because if he can be a true number 1 edge rusher on a team and truly one of the most dynamic edge rushers in the NFL. If you think about it, a lot of the edge rushers in the NFL that are more situational, that aren't true number one impactful players, those guys are either power or their speed. But if you think about some of the best edge rushers in the league, those guys are speed to power, and we saw that today with Mike Green, again, especially in that one-on-one matchup with Josh Connolly.
I completely agree. I mean, I don't have much more to add. The big thing for me was in teams, he was effective against the run. And I thought, the first game I had watched on him was Ohio State, and I thought against Ohio State, it was like, yeah, they're running the ball a lot, but it didn't feel like he was playing poorly. Like, I wouldn't have walked away from that like, yeah, he can't play the run. And then today to see him in teams be so effective and then run over an offensive lineman because he's that twitchy. Just to throw a quick name in there because we haven't touched on much, Donovan, I think he could be the top edge rusher out of this entire group that we end up seeing here. Again, last name I'm going to completely mess it up, but he also had a win on Connerly today. And I think that for me through 2 days, from a consistencies perspective, has been the best stand-up outside edge rusher for me so far. But this was definitely a great step for Mike Green. I just think there's a lot of risk for top 5, and I don't know that he can get there. Or top 10, sorry.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to say, too, just kind of going back to the trenches, because we do at least have to make a note about this for the people. The best offensive lineman here, I would honestly say from both sides, both the national team and the American team, I would say the best offensive lineman has been Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Now, many thought maybe he could be a tackle. Could he potentially be a guard? He's been repping in that guard here at the Senior Bowl, but he has looked absolutely dominant on every single rep. He's been hard to get by with every single defensive tackle, edge defender that he's been able to go up against, linebackers that are shooting the gap here. He has been absolutely amazing and only gotten better each and every single day. Now, unfortunately for us Patriots fans, we're not looking to draft a guard high, but if this is somebody that any team watching could potentially get, he's going to be an absolute steal in the interior.
It could be a Lions pick. I'm gonna be honest with you because he's playing everywhere, and we know that he can play everywhere. And a guy at that size, like it opens up the door for everything. And I think again today, to that point, like the handy's just been great. He's got so many early wins. He plays with like a competitive toughness to him. He did have a loss today to Joshua Farmer. Just throw some love to Florida State there for a second. But he gets wins against the best. And when he loses, it's like, who was that guy that beat him? Because someone had to do a really good job there. He had a win on Yaya and pass pro in the one-on-ones. He had a win on Ty Robinson, who I thought has been coming along. So I'm right with you, man. I think that this dude has been the best offensive lineman hands down.
Now, I do want to ask you about someone because I think you're a little bit more versed in this player, and I want Patriots fans to get an idea about this guy because this was the first reported player. Now, it's not the only player they've met with, but this was the first reported player that we heard the Patriots met with at the Senior Bowl, and that was an edge rusher out of Arkansas by the name of Landon Jackson. Now, he's been a little bit up and down through 2 days, but this is a versatile guy. He plays on the edge. He can also play, stand-up linebacker. He can be stand-up, hand in his dirt, whatever it may be, and the Patriots are obviously looking for some edge rusher help. I don't think this is going to be a number one guy, but I think he has the tools that the Patriots like, and more specifically, I got to interview him, and we'll play that here in a minute, but I think his personality and the characteristics really fit a Mike Vrabel-led team, and he just has Patriot written all over him. In case New England does end up drafting Landon Jackson, what were your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he feels like, I think it's perfect. Mike Vrabel, like he's a hard-nosed kind of guy, right? He's long. He can stand up and drop into coverage. He's got that flex. He literally said, and I think you're going to show, he can play everywhere on the defense line, he believes. So I think for you guys specifically, you think about the edge rushers that you guys have brought in, right? You guys have went with those kind of builders that are hardworking. Maybe there's some limitations in how they can win. I think he shows some real stiffness, but he's long, he's versatile, and he's a tough player, man. And I think there's going to be limitations to that, but I think guys like Chase Winovich, even though that didn't work out, just some of the guys that you guys have brought in over the years, he fits into that. So I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and I'll be really curious to see ultimately how Mike Vrabel leads his defense, but what we've known about the Patriots, whether it's been Bill Belichick or Gerard Mayo, is that if you're able to play all over the defensive line, if you can play at edge and you can play at defensive tackle, you're somebody who's going to get more playing time. Yeah. I think that Landon Jackson has the size and the length that you just want to cook up in a damn lab. Ultimately, I think it comes down to a little bit more consistency, and if he can add that, he has all the tools to be a good edge rusher in the NFL. But let's go ahead and let's see what Landon Jackson had to say in my interview with him earlier today. Roundtable Sports, my name is Colby Cochran. I'm here with Landon Jackson at the Senior Bowl on day 2. Landon, how do you feel that you play here on day 2 compared to day 1?
Yeah, I feel like I definitely developed a lot more today. I feel like in football, you always have bad days, always just got to bounce back from, develop each and every day. So that's something that I feel like it's kind of how I am. Every season I always start slow and kind of work my way into it throughout fall camp. So, yeah, I feel like just taking it day by day, getting better each and every day.
Yeah, and Landon, now we heard that the Patriots met with you yesterday. That is the only interview we've heard so far that the Patriots have had. Tell us what you can about how that went.
Yeah, no, I feel like they've had a lot of other they met with a bunch of other guys as well. I personally met with I think 16 first day and then 8 the next. But yeah, I mean that interview went well. You know, I met with the scouts and everything. They were, just asking about my background, where I came from. You know, just kind of getting to know me a little bit. So I mean, it was pretty cool.
Now, last question here is, what separates you from all the other edge rushers here?
Yeah, my versatility. I feel like I can slide inside, play inside a lot. I got a lot of film playing, really from nose tackle all the way to DN. So really, I could just do a lot, and I feel like I'm very versatile. Got a different build, so I feel like that definitely helps me a lot.
For sure. Well, Landon, we appreciate you, but I'm Colby Cochran with Roundtable Sports. Thanks for watching. Yeah, dude, Landon just an absolute dog. He looks scary, right? He looks like a dude that would push me over and tell me I'm not giving you a damn interview, but the nicest guy, man. Let me tell you. It was my second ever interview. And after that Higgins interview, I was like, you know what? I'm well versed. I can do anything in the damn world. Yeah. Went out there day 2, and I said, Dose, give me my questions. And the phone was glitching after I asked Landon if I could have an interview. And I was like, forget the questions. We are free balling. That's exactly what I did, and it still worked out. But you know what? Got a massive, massive donation that I want to get into here. Diehard Pats fan comes in with an insane $50 donation. Everybody give it up in the chat for Diehard Pats fan. Says, thanks for always keeping us informed. Your channel has grown so much over the years. I feel like I've been here from the start. Keep it coming, PG. You have the best Patriots content and overall great football content. Hey, we appreciate that. Guys, make sure that you leave a big like on the stream right now. Help support us. And again, all of our coverage from the interviews that I did, from Dose to Richie from Jets Media, that Dan did, on top of all of the highlights that we've been posting exclusively filmed by us, is on Twitter with Roundtable Sports. Check it out at Roundtable SN. That is the handle on Twitter, Roundtable SN, and the same thing over on Instagram. But a big shout out there to Diehard Pats fan for supporting the channel. It goes such a long way when you donate. And Dose, I'm sure you can say the same thing. You know, when your audience donates, it goes a long way, because you know what? YouTube does not like to pay very well with those YouTube AdSense, as I'm sure you know.
It is nice, man. We appreciate y'all for that. If you definitely get the birthday cakes in the chat when that happens too. You know what I mean? Show a little. Hey, I just want a couple quick hitters on the way out of the national side. A couple quick hitters. I want to hit on the linebacker real quick. Nick Martin. I think that's how you. Yeah, Nicholas Martin. Yeah, I thought he was the best coverage linebacker, hands down. Like every rep, he consistently won in pass coverage. I thought he had a great day. And then I also wanted to touch on. Well, Kaiser also had an interception, so let's make sure we throw that in there. He had an interception today. But I want to hit on him, and then also, I think I lost my man here, but it's okay. You know what I mean? We'll just keep it moving. Yeah. Quincy Riley. He was the guy that nearly had an interception as well. I know Brochmo talked about him. He thought that this was just a feisty corner. And we had some of that, some of these undersized guys playing out wide. It's very vanilla schemes. But later into practice, he nearly came up with an interception trying to jump an in-breaker. And then finally, the offensive tackle out of Texas Tech. I thought that today, Caleb Rogers made his presence felt. You get those guys that are people movers. Like, we have some ups and downs. Wyatt Millen has been felt a little bit up and down. I thought Marcus Mbao came out early. But it was specifically Caleb Rogers that felt like a real people mover today. And that's what I've been, kind of latched onto, is guys that I feel like are moving people, and I thought he was one of them.
Yeah, and Ezariah Thomas, the cornerback, I mean, he was somebody that, we all really liked on day 1, but maybe day 2 started to slow down a little bit. What do you think about him? Yeah,
Ezariah Thomas. I mean, look, man, I think you guys nailed on that one. Like, that was one that you guys had a lot of hype in. There's a lot of length there specifically. And I think this is one of those weird spots because everything does feel so vanilla, so you're wondering how fast these guys are specifically going to play. And I think that the guys that stand out are the ones that just look really sticky. But in terms of length, and you're trying to fit coverage schemes, it's like Trey almost unfortunately got hurt today. You're trying to, there's specific schemes that certain guys are just going to work better in, that they're not maybe getting as many looks at in a situation like this. So he could be a guy that I think falls into that very easily. He could fall into that.
Yeah, I agree. But before we go on over to the American roster, I do want to give a massive shout out to the sponsors of this video over at BetUS. Right now, when you guys go ahead, sign up, whether it's on their mobile app or their website, and you use the promo code that you see on the screen, YouTube150. Again, that is YouTube150. You will lock yourselves into a limited time exclusive offer of a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, followed by, get this, Dose, 125% sign-up bonus on your next 2 deposits, all the
What?
way up to $2,000. That is a deal on your first 3 deposits when you sign up right now. And the great thing is that the Super Bowl is right around the bend. So this is the best time to get in on the action with BetUS. And you know what, Dose? The Patriots, they weren't good this year. They're officially eliminated. Now, unfortunately for you, your Detroit Lions had a lot of hope for them.
Okay, this is unnecessary.
Respectfully, they didn't do as well as I was hoping that they were going to. I had them as the Super Bowl champions this year. That unfortunately didn't work out for either of us. So some of our fans might be watching, some of our viewers might be watching this and saying, I am not using this damn sign-up bonus on no Super Bowl fan my team. And that's okay, because you know what? BetUS have the best betting variety in the business. We're not just talking about NFL games, but NFL futures. You can bet on, the top free agents. Where are those guys going to go? The NFL draft. That's a really cool thing. I mean, with the Titans having the number 1 overall pick, where are they going to go? These are just some of the cool things that you can bet on with BetUS on top of, college football, basketball, baseball, horse racing, fighting, politics, entertainment, you name it, they're going to have it. And the best part is that the deal doesn't stop there, because you can also get 10% back on your net losses 2 times a year. So big shout out to BetUS for sponsoring both my channel and Dose's channel. We could not be here without them. But play smart, play responsible, never bet more than you can afford to lose. And shout out to BetUS. But Dose, Let's get back here and let's start talking about the American roster and who is somebody that stood out to you.
Yeah, I mean, to work right through it, first off, running back, I don't think we've given, I haven't given a lot of attention to running back to this point outside of Edwards and the passing game. And it's harder in the run game because you're trying to focus on who's creating the movement. But for me, like the 2 guys, I mean, you have RJ Harvey circled. I would circle Trevor Etienne. I think as a route runner, it looks like it's going to translate to the next level. So I specifically focus there. And then Devin Neal. I think Devin Neal shows a lot of big playmaking within the run game. I think he's had some really nice cuts. Those would be the 2 that I would probably circle. And RJ Harvey's been as fluid as it gets as a receiving back. There might be limitations in what it's going to look like, but even you pointed out, he's getting open. RJ Harvey was one of my favorite backs. I had him in my top 5 coming into this thing. He reminds me a lot of DeAndre Swift in the play style, and I know you even took note of him.
Yeah, RJ Harvey was definitely the guy that I was also going to mention. Not just good as a running back, but I was more specifically trying to look at what were the one-on-one drills between these running backs and these linebackers. And Harvey, even through contact, made some really good catches. There was one catch where he was able to adjust in the air, 360, and still come down with the ball. That is really impressive. And we touched upon it a little bit earlier with, I believe it was Edwards, when we talked about him. Just saying that if you're able to catch the ball out of the backfield, if you're able to line up in the slot, you're able to line up out wide, that's how you as a running back are going to be a little bit more dynamic and get on the field immediately and in a higher overall rotation.
Yeah, I was say he's pretty thick in the lower body, man. He's got a wide base, bro. He feels like a guy that could last a long time. That's what I'm trying to say. There's consistency there, and you had the pass catching element, just be a safety blanket. And I think he's clearly shown that he could be that and beyond, like you pointed on.
What did you think about wide receiver Jalen Royals out of Utah State?
My goodness, man.
This is one of, I believe it was Broshmo who had him in his top 5 wide receivers when we did our Draftaholics top 5 receivers in the draft. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I think that he's been I think this may have been the most impressed I've been of any player to this point, coming in on expectation, because I already had a background on what it was going to look like, and my concerns have not showed up whatsoever. Everything that I was hopeful of have shown up completely, and he's a guy that I think that the production isn't as important. It's going to be like, okay, what are the concerns about him? How is the footwork going to look? What does his route running look like? We know that he can burn, he can fly, and we saw that again early, but he's won at every level. He's won underneath off the line. He's cooked guys off the line. He's won in the second level on out routes, and then he's taken the top off, and he's looked so smooth and everything's done. Everything looks so efficient. He looks so polished and nuanced early in his routes. For me, he's been incredibly impressive to this point.
I'm going to give you a name from a wide receiver group here in the American roster that stood out to me here on day 2 that I don't think anybody's talking about, and that is going to be Jack Beck out of TCU. Yeah. This is the brother of, now I'm blanking on his brother's name right now, but who ultimately and unfortunately died in the attack on, I believe it was New Year's Eve. That was his brother, which, by the way, the Senior Bowl did a really, really cool thing where I believe it was the number 7 that they all put on the back of their helmets to kind of represent his brother throughout the Senior Bowl. So that's something really cool that they did. But here on day 2, I was able to see him make some really good plays through contact, really good contested catches, and even that ability to have really good balance on the way down and get yards after the contact. He was fired up on a lot of those one-on-one drills. There was a point where even in team drills, he was double covered and still made a play on the sideline working through those guys. And that's a really tough play to make. I mean, that's hard to make even when you're just going one-on-one, but in double coverage, also having to go up against the sideline, that's like working through 3 defenders, and dude still came down with it. So I thought that was really impressive. Thought he was a tight end. I looked at him and I said, looking down the roster of tight ends, and I'm like, where is this guy? I'm looking at him. It's a wide receiver. Has the build of a tight end. I thought it was really impressive.
Bro, he's got some high pointing upside, as you're pointing out. I mean, the guy, I don't want to be too negative, but Arian Smith, obviously out of Georgia, didn't look great today. And actually, the biggest issue I had was the one-on-ones. I mean, there was twice that he was just on the ground. It didn't look like there was any kind of route balance whatsoever. And to me, again, that comes back to the footwork aspect. Obviously, he's on a slimmer side, but this is just a rough day across the board. He bounced back and made a fantastic play eventually, but I thought just in terms of the route running, it looked super messy. So I just thought that we had to throw that in there.
Yeah, even Isaac Tesla out of Arkansas,
a little bit.
That is another wide receiver that through 2 days, especially here on day 2, has shown out a little bit. So, some good wide receivers here in the Senior Bowl, and there's been a lot of talk about how this wide receiver group isn't very good, and I'm starting to wonder a little bit if it's better than maybe we had originally thought. Now, look, I think that the expectations shouldn't be as high as they were in recent years, and I think we're calling this a bad year for wide receivers because we don't have multiple blue chip players at that position. I mean, you even look last year, you had Marvin Harrison Jr., you had Rome Odunze, you had Malik Neighbors. These are just stacked wide receiver groups that we've had in recent years, and while we don't have that, I do still think that there are a lot of receivers that have that high upside, and we saw it at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. This feels like these are your day 3 guys, and it's like, which one can we make work with what we like to do offensively? And there's definitely different styles in here that can make it happen. So I think even a guy like Ty Felton, like he feels like a potential compete for a wide receiver 5 spot. Maybe he makes a roster, but he could be very successful in the preseason, because he gets open, and we've seen that he's sure-handed to this point. So yeah, it feels like a lot of very potential day 3 type of picks that could slide onto a roster.
Yeah, my last guy here with the American roster on the offensive side was tight end Mason Taylor out of LSU. This was a guy that I had comped to Mike Gesicki on our draft show. Again, Draftaholics on Roundtable Sports YouTube channel. Had him as my 4th best tight end, I believe. This is a guy that not very good at blocking. He still needs to work in that aspect, but is a very big body wide receiver, essentially. Really good route sheet, works really good through contact, and I think we saw it through 2 days. I'd like to see it a little bit more. I wasn't necessarily as impressed with his receiving game as I thought, and I think he has to be a really dynamic receiving threat or his draft stock's ultimately going to fall, right? Like if you can't block, you better be a damn good receiver, and I feel like I didn't see enough from him through 2 days that I ultimately expected, but he did still have some good moments.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing to me is he showed there was a little bit more catch radius than I expected there, and especially in team drills.
Lengthy guy.
Like who?
Lengthy guy. Dude.
Lengthy guy. I think there's a ton of upside as a separator. I'm excited. I'm on the bandwagon for him specifically. But this entire tight end room, I mean, has something to offer. I think Dupree showed a little bit today. I've liked him for a little while. He's a nice run blocker too. But even a guy like Jake Stool, like his most productive day, hands down. Kind of a weird build. He kind of looks like a receiver playing the position. But the entire tight end position, there's something that you could point to. Fidone out of Nebraska had a couple of reps in there. Hawes had the little one-handed underneath flat catch that he had. So the entire tight end room is living up to its name as being like, yo, this is it. It's fantastic this season. And just to hit on a couple of these offensive linemen, Willie Lampkin, this is the 2nd straight day I walked away impressed with the North Carolina interior offensive lineman from consistency. Emory Jones just went at it with Shamar. And look, he had some losses to Texas edge defender. We saw those in the one-on-ones, but specifically, it's the nastiness that I think that he brought, and it was the responsiveness that he brought. Like, he's shown recovery ability. He's shown ability to get back into plays that look messy early, and I think that's massive. But it's specifically the competitiveness that I think we saw with the drive. Like, he gets beat by Shamar next time he's there. He puts him on the ground. There was multiple times after the rep where he's getting into it with the opposing side. This offensive line group came together. Carson Vincent I gave love to yesterday. This whole offensive line group, I think, came together. Jonas showing flexibility that he could play offensive tackle as well. I like what we're seeing from these guys and what the steps that they took in day 2.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on over to the defensive side of the American roster. Now, a guy that I was hoping to see a little bit more from, especially through 2 days before he got injured, was Trey Amos, from Ole Miss, who was arguably the best cornerback here on both sides when it comes to the Senior Bowl. Do you have any thoughts on him before he went down with that injury? By the way, had to get helped off by 2 teammates, was able to walk off under his own power to the locker room, but we didn't see him the rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, very little that we saw him. I believe he had a pass breakup today. Like, he looked about as smooth as he gets. I don't think he had any flags called on him, and he was contesting every opportunity that was thrown his way. I thought it looked good for the most part. We just didn't see as much action. But I'll tell you who did, man. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to ride with my man, Upton Stout. Dude, I think he was the best cornerback in the entire 2 days, and it's not even close for me. Like, I feel like if someone was tracking his stats, he may have allowed like 1 reception to 8 targets so far to this point. And it's like there's real limitations, but he's super undersized. He's playing wide corner. Even today, I think it was against Beck that I think it was an incomplete pass, but it hit his hands. You're like, he could have caught that, even though he was in a great position. But he's constantly in a good position. He's patient when he falls behind. There's not a lot of fear and like, oh man, I'm in trouble at this point. He has been the most consistent. I'm all in. Even on special teams, he brings a little bit of that dog energy. Like, you feel like that energy of like, yo, I'm undersized. And everybody knows it here, but nobody's talking about me. This is crazy. I'm out here putting in work. He's been my favorite corner by far.
Yeah, now this defensive line and even these linebackers were definitely the talk of the town when it came to this overall American roster. Like we said, when it came to the quarterbacks, when it came to Milroe, when it came to Jackson Dart, those guys seem to struggle a little bit, especially the offensive line here for the overall American roster, but that's because of just how good these linebackers are. Very athletic linebackers on both sides, the national roster, the American roster, coming out here for the Senior Bowl. Some of the linebackers that stood out to me, I mean, number one, you definitely have to look at Demetrius Knight, who's been fired up and juiced up over the last 2 days. Our boy Dan Mitchell got an interview with him. You can check that out over at Roundtable Sports, but he's been able to make plays over the last couple days. I think in large part also, not to take anything away from him, but in large part because of what this defensive line was able to do. I know you're a big fan of Savion Jones, right? Why don't you tell us about him?
Savion Jones. Oh, yeah, we go on defensive line. Like, this entire defensive line, I think, again, this is just such a loaded group. Let me just point this real quick because we were hitting linebackers. I don't want to – Eugene – I didn't talk about linebackers at all yesterday. So I just want to make sure, like, Eugene Asante had to run stuff. He drew a holding penalty today. Shamar James had to run stuff that I remember. And then Jack Kaiser had the interception that we pointed out as well. Like, he feels like he fits. There was a lot of these linebackers I think made a lot more plays, especially Jalen McLeod. He was involved as well. But Eugene stood out because he was so interactive with the sideline and the coaching staff. There was like a vibe and a presence that he was giving off the entire day. But yeah, for me, the defensive line when it comes to Savion Jones, it's the fact of a guy's 290 and he's that athletic and he's playing DN. Here's what stuck out to me, though, Colby. They kicked him inside for 1 rep. The first time they stepped him inside, he was playing defensive tackle, and he gets to run stuff. And that stood out to me because we're looking at guys that are that long, that's athletic, that big, and you're like, okay, is there a reason he has to play defensive end? Can he not handle it on the inside? They put him on the inside, and he absolutely handled business. So for me, this defensive line is loaded, and I think he's a guy that's like super unpolished. But as we get further into the draft, there's going to be a lot of traits that you love.
Yeah, I would say my last biggest standout here with the American roster on that defensive line is, Dion Walker out of Kentucky. I think he's really been the talk of the town here for the entire NFL and all NFL fans. His draft stock immediately shot up, especially on day one when those measurables came in. His one-on-one matchups were absolutely insane. Yesterday on day one, he went up against, his coaches. Before we got to see, the actual O-line against the D-line, you see the D-line kind of going up against the coaches with those pads, and he absolutely off the line, really good burst off the line, by the way, but absolutely bull rushes this coach, has this, I feel terribly bad for this coach, has this coach flying back, and you just see Walker get up, look at him, and walk away. No remorse, and I absolutely loved that dog mentality. He will run through a brick wall for absolutely anybody. He will have absolutely no care who you are, coach, player, on your team, opposing team, and that's that dog mentality you like. But 6'6", 340 pounds for a defensive tackle, this is going to be a guy that rises on draft boards.
Bro, as soon as I tried to criticize him, I was like, I don't know if he's going to handle double teams that well. And I think I still have questions. The next 3 reps, he dominated. He's just pushing his guy back to the pocket. You're like, okay, he's pretty good.
My bad.
It was like 3 straight plays. Like, all right, I shouldn't have said nothing there. This dude, he just got fired. I don't know if you heard me or what. But the other guy, because we're hitting on these defensive linemen here, Another guy that stood out to me is Tim Smith. I think this guy, because of a guy like this, is going completely under the radar. Tim Smith is playing nose tackle for Alabama, and they have a history of putting out some pretty productive Alabama defensive linemen, typically in the mid-round, so probably fall right into that. But athletically, at his size, the traits that he's showing an ability to handle multiple blockers, but also he's showing a lot of upside as a pass rusher. I mean, he split gaps multiple times. It's like, all right, there's some athleticism. And then he hit him with a spin move, and I was like, what the heck was that, Tim Smith? That dude's an athlete, and he's the guy that thinks going completely under the radar because of a guy like Walker, rightfully so, is taking a lot of that attention. So that's the guy that actually circled out of that entire unit. And then the flip side is a guy like Cameron Jackson. I think it's been kind of a disaster for Florida interior defensive lineman. Look, it's my first impression of him, and the guy that I think that's been attacked the most in the run game is probably that man.
Now, before we log off, is there anybody else from either the American or the national roster that you wanted to talk about before we log off?
Yeah, man, I was just a quick note on the edge defender, because we didn't hit on Princely much, but Baron Sorrell, we were looking at him before we got on here. Like, this was a guy that, in terms of hand usage, that's really strong. In terms of the athleticism laterally, we saw him on a lot of stunt movement specifically, and that was effective, and he had some good wins against Emory Jones specifically today. But it's the other guys, man. It's Kyle Kennard has now put back-to-back days. He can play the run. He looks like a round 1 or round 2, probably more round 2 because of pass rush upside there. Shamar Stewart looks like a round 1 pick. He's living up to everybody's hype. I mean, everybody's expectation, this guy's going to be pretty darn good. He looks pretty darn good. So this entire room to me, Jared Ivey, again, made multiple plays again today. And even RJ Oben, if you look at the interception that Kaiser had, it was Oben with the sack on the play. He had 2 reps that stood out to me today. So this entire defensive front special, man. This is a good draft for any team that needs pass rushers, and most teams do. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like this is a year where the linebackers are just as athletic as ever. The defensive line might be the best defensive line class that we've seen. We are going to see multiple starting level edge rushers come out, not in just the first round, but we're going to see guys in the 3rd and 4th round that are making true impacts immediately. And I can't wait to see how this class does. I mean, between the running backs, between the tight ends, between the edge rushers, those are the 3 positions that you're definitely looking at for your respective teams because of just how stacked they are. But that is going to wrap it up here for today's video. Multi-streaming here on my YouTube channel, Patriots Global, where I cover everything involving the New England Patriots. This is Dose of Dion. You guys can follow him on YouTube if you aren't already, where he covers everything involving the Detroit Lions. Now, if you guys want to hear more of my thoughts, more of Dose's thoughts, Dan's and Richie's thoughts, which you have not heard, make sure you guys go ahead, subscribe here to Patriots Global, subscribe to Dose of Dion 2.0, but also go ahead and subscribe to Roundtable Sports YouTube channel. Check them out on Twitter at RoundtableSN for all of our exclusive footage and interviews that we are getting here at the Senior Bowl. Again, today's video was brought to you by BetUS. Make sure you guys go ahead and use that code YouTube150 when you sign up to get that exclusive offer from them. We appreciate you guys so much for watching and kicking it up with us here with a late night stream. Please make sure you leave a big like on both of our videos on the way out. It supports us tremendously. And again, turn on that bell notification when you do subscribe so that you can be notified when we post. But until next time, I appreciate you guys for watching and stay safe.